What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Joet Gonzalez, 25 wins and 2 losses, taking on Isaac Dogboe, 23 wins and 2 losses. This is a quality non-title fight in the featherweight division, the very stacked featherweight division, by the way. The featherweight division is one of those where if there were more instances of cross-promotional efforts, like this could give us several fun fights, because on the top rank side, you've got WBO champ Emmanuel Navarrete, who most see to be the best featherweight in boxing today. So you've got Navarrete, you've got Joet Gonzalez, Isaac Dogboe, and then the up-and-coming Cuban fighter Robeisy Ramirez, right? That's all Bob Arum, top rank, ESPN. Then on DAZN, you have Leigh Wood, who just had what I see to be as the fight of the year earlier this year versus Michael Conlan. Josh Warrington, who just recaptured the IBF belt, knocking out or stopping Kiko Martinez, who had stopped Kid Galahad, who also fights on DAZN. And then on the PBC side, we just saw Mark Magsayo, who just beat Gary Russell Jr. to take the WBC title. We just saw him lose that newly won title versus Ray Vargas, the former 122-pound champ who went up to 126 and now is a 2-division champion, capturing the WBC belt from Mark Magsayo. And then, of course, you've got Leo Santa Cruz also on PBC at 126. So you've got these different islands of activity. It's just a shame we can't get cross-promotional, cross-network types of fights done in this division. But this division has so much talent that even on any one of those respective islands, you can still make for some pretty interesting fights, and we've gotten a lot of that over the past couple years. Not to mention Mauricio Lara, who's looking as dangerous as anyone in the 126-pound division. He's the one who knocked out Josh Warrington and then got headbutt in the rematch, but most recently scored another knockout in his latest fight. So yeah, I love the featherweight division right now, especially if Gary Russell Jr., the former WBC champ, can get the career back on track. But here we've got Joet Gonzalez versus Isaac Dogboe. Isaac Dogboe, a former WBO champ, down at 122. With Joet Gonzalez, you've got a pretty good technical boxer who sometimes gets off to slow starts, but then starts applying increased pressure as the fight goes on. He's good at boxing from range, but can also kind of get inside and do a lot of good work to the body. You know, throws a lot of hooks when he's in closer range. Otherwise, likes to, the busier he gets his left hand, his jab, the better his results are for him. So if he could get his jab going, he's usually doing a pretty good job, because then he could put some power punches behind that jab. So he was winning a lot of his fights, beating some, lesser than some mid-tier caliber competition. Then he fought Shakur Stevenson in 2019 in October, and he got outboxed, lost via unanimous decision. This is when Shakur Stevenson won the WBO featherweight belt. So it was vacated by Oscar Valdez at 126, and then Shakur Stevenson and Joet Gonzalez had the opportunity to fight for the vacant belt. Shakur Stevenson outboxed Joet Gonzalez, winning just about every round. And again, that was late 2019, so then COVID hit, and then late in the 2020, we'll call it the COVID summer, when they started to bring boxing back slowly, we had Joet Gonzalez fighting Miguel Mariaga, who at that point had only lost to like tip-top competition, guys like Nicholas Walters, Vasily Lomachenko. Miguel Mariaga was a very good fighter, also lost to Oscar Valdez. He was one of Valdez's title challenges. So those were Mariaga's 3 losses at the time that he fought Joet Gonzalez. And again, Joet Gonzalez's only loss at the time was to Shakur Stevenson. So Joet Gonzalez kind of surprisingly outworked and just beat up on Miguel Mariaga, who wasn't looking like his full self that evening. But again, Joet Gonzalez is a pretty good fighter. He came in very hungry. And so yeah, he just took it to Mariaga, especially in the second half of that fight. And so that was probably Joet Gonzalez's most impressive victory to date. And then he fought the human cyclone at 126, Emmanuel Navarrete, and we'll hear his name resurface once again in this whole Joet Gonzalez versus Isaac Dogboe story. But Joet Gonzalez actually fought Emmanuel Navarrete about as well as anybody I've seen him fight. Like, Navarrete gets hit a lot, but the way that he throws so many different punches from so many different angles and how much length his arms have given his height, Navarrete just throws so many punches that he has the opponents often looking like they're surrounded, because he also knows how to sidestep very well. So he'll throw a couple punches while he's in motion, kind of sidestepping and then throwing a few more. So it's like, even if the opponent feels like they got this angle more or less covered after Navarrete throws 2, 3, 4 punches, Navarrete's then throwing punches from right here. And it seems like it's consistent throughout the fight. Well, Joet Gonzalez was also trying his best to take the fight to Navarrete, so it wasn't one-way traffic. Navarrete, again, was getting hit as much in this fight against Joet Gonzalez as I've seen him get hit. Nonetheless, it was still a Navarrete-style fight, which I haven't seen Navarrete lose. I mean, he has one loss in his career, and it was way back in like 2012, like in his 6th professional fight, and that was via decision. But Navarrete has just been looking like a terror, and he did ultimately beat Joet Gonzalez via unanimous decision, and that was another successful title defense for Navarrete of that WBO 126-pound belt. So since then, Joet Gonzalez fought Gio Santissima out of the Philippines, and this was actually a rough fight for Joet Gonzalez. In the early rounds, it looked like Santissima was more or less outworking him, just kind of taking the fight to him. And again, Joet Gonzalez sometimes gets off to a slow start, so sometimes he'll do a little bit too much waiting and watching, and that was the case early against Santissima. But then Joet Gonzalez started taking the fight to him, again, started applying more pressure round after round, started working behind the jab, getting a lot of combinations off at range, digging to the body a ton, really working Santissima's body. And that, again, is a key ingredient for Joet Gonzalez. So Joet Gonzalez ended up stopping Santissima in the 9th round, although I will say the referee's decision to call it was, within the discretion of the referee, but he basically warned Santissima in the corner in the round before, because Santissima's eye was really fattening up, and he was really showing a lot of swelling and bruising around the face, not only the eye area. So, they were taking a close look at Santissima, and then after getting the stern warning, they entered the 9th round, and with about maybe a minute left, because he was taking some more shots in that 9th round, but he was knowing that he was on the clock, plus it was the 9th round in a 10-round fight, and this was still competitive. Like, he was very much in the fight. It wasn't like Joet Gonzalez would be dominating on the scorecard. Like, he might have been up, but it was still a very competitive fight. And so this 9th round was competitive because Santissima not only knows that he's in the fight, but knows that they're about to stop the fight because of how his face has been looking and some of the shots that he's been taking. So this 9th round was competitive, and then Joet Gonzalez hits him with a nice right hand, and then the ref just jumps in, like with the first power punch in that, exchange, in that, period of a few seconds. Joet Gonzalez hits him with the right hand, doesn't stagger him or drop him or anything like that, but the ref just jumps in and says, nope, that's it. And so Santissima's corner is like, what the hell? And Santissima was pretty upset by that stoppage, but it was within the realm of reason, and again, within the discretion of the referee. That's one of his jobs, is to make those types of judgment calls. So Joet Gonzalez wins that via 9th round TKO, and now he's about to fight Isaac Dogboe, again, the former 122-pound belt holder, where even if you look at his rise to earning the title, like when he beat Cesar Juarez in his hometown, Dogboe's hometown of Ghana, Dogboe, a Ghanaian fighter, and they have a pretty rich history of boxing as well, most notably the legend Azuma Nelson, but also former champ Ike Corte, Joshua Clottey, Joseph Agbeko, David Cote, Floyd Robertson, not to be confused with Floyd Patterson, Floyd Robertson, Emmanuel Tego, who we just saw fight Ryan Garcia unsuccessfully, but also Alfred Cote, a former belt holder in the lighter divisions. They've had a lot of Charles Adamu, like they've had Ben Tacky. Sorry, I could go on, but they've had a lot of fighters, challengers, contenders, and champions over the years. And Isaac Dogboe was kind of the pride of Ghana for a moment, especially when he was working up the ranks and he beat Cesar Juarez in Ghana. And you look at the way that the celebration around him as he's standing up on the turnbuckle buckle, celebrating to the crowd after scoring the stoppage. I mean, everybody's just going ballistic out there, and it's such an energy. I mean, you saw it in the Congo, a different country within the large continent of Africa, when Junior Makabu, I believe it was his first fight, dramatic fight against Nkunu. We just saw a very competitive rematch between them. But yeah, in some of these countries within Africa and within some of East Europe and South Asia, you just get a different type of celebration going. Also in the Latin American countries as well. But there's just so much exuberance because often it's some of these smaller countries where, you know, their top athletes are more beloved and appreciated. Like in the United States or in Britain, there's so many different, you know, notable professional athletes of different sports where sometimes a pro athlete, even a champion, could be walking through the streets anywhere in the United States and pretty much go undetected. But try being like Mark Magsayo or Manny Pacquiao and walking around the Philippines undetected, you know? Well, when Isaac Dogboe stopped Cesar Juarez, you know, Ghana was at a fever pitch in their boxing world. So then he challenged then champion Jesse Magdaleno, who actually gave Nonito Donaire one of his worst career losses. He didn't even stop Nonito Donaire, but he had Donaire just looking so slow and so just plodding. At that point, and this was several years ago, I thought Donaire was on the brink of retirement then. That was before this whole latest chapter in his career with the successes and the 2 fights against the monster Naoya Inoue. But Jesse Magdaleno, the then WBO junior featherweight champion, after beating Nonito Donaire for that WBO belt, and Isaac Dogboe just took it to Jesse Magdaleno, a very ambush style fighter. He's very short for the division, like 5'4". So he likes to jump in and out of the pocket, let his hands go. Pretty quick punches. He's pretty good for being so small at setting up his left hook, sometimes by throwing another punch out there to get you to look at something so then he could jump in with the left hook. So he's got pretty good feet, a lot of energy, stays pretty low in his crouch, knows how to get in and then out of the way to where he's like at far enough distance where there's no engagement, because he's not going to just stand out in the taller fighters' long boxing range and then stick around there. No, he's either going to be out or he's going to come in. So yeah, he was coming the hell in against Jesse Magdaleno, ended up stopping him in the 11th round to win the WBO junior featherweight title. Like, that was a pretty dramatic 2-fight streak for Isaac Dogboe. And even before that, when he beat Javier Chacon, so he beat like the Argentinian Chacon. Before that, he beat Argentinian Julian Aristule. And then after beating Cesar Juarez, he then beats Jesse Magdaleno to win the belt. So then he defends it successfully once against Hidenori Otaki. And then his career hits a hell of a roadblock in the form of Emmanuel Navarrete. So Isaac Dogboe is defending his WBO 122-pound title. Keep in mind, this is 122. Him nor Navarrete are up at 126 yet. So Emmanuel Navarrete, you know, it's competitive in the first half of the fight, but they're noting the way that Navarrete is putting pressure on Dogboe and making Dogboe have to work so hard. Like, there were no extended moments where Isaac Dogboe could stand on the outside out of his opponent's range, because Navarrete is always just up in you, throwing multiple punches and just, you know, showing a little bit of head movement, but it's almost like he's so just committed to letting his hands go. Sometimes Navarrete forgets about defense, but his feet are moving as well, so he's not just somebody who's coming in one direction plotting. Isaac Dogboe barely had room to breathe, and you could feel a sense of Isaac Dogboe having to kind of hold on to even make it through the 12 rounds with Navarrete. Well, Navarrete won that via unanimous decision. Really rough fight for Isaac Dogboe, but still not nearly as rough as the rematch against Navarrete. Man. So now Navarrete is defending his newly won title against Isaac Dogboe, and this fight goes even worse for Dogboe than their first fight. So Dogboe is on that treadmill from hell earlier in the rematch, just taking a lot of punishment, not even looking as snappy with his movement and punch absorption and durability. He's almost looking like a different Dogboe by this point. Like, this looks so demoralizing that by the time he got stopped, Dogboe gets stopped in the 12th round. So he has to suffer and endure this extended beating and still can't go the distance because of how much fire he's still taking in the 12th round. Like, these 2 fights against Navarrete were so demoralizing and so grueling and brutal that I was really wondering where Isaac Dogboe's career goes from there. Because look, he's not of the build where you could look at somebody and see that they have enough of a physical frame to go up in weight. Like if the weight drain was like hurting you, then you could go up because you're Ray Vargas and you could go from 122 to 126 without batting an eye. Even though Ray Vargas was at 122 for a long time, but you've got different fighters who you could see that there's still room to grow. Isaac Dogboe, again, 5'4", so you're wondering, what, is he just gonna go and find new success at 126? Well, that's more or less what he did. After losing that rematch devastatingly and then taking more than a year off, not to mention, COVID hit about 6 months after the rematch with Navarrete. So he returns to the ring in about like 13 months against Chris Avalos, up at 126 this time, and then Dogboe wins via 8th round TKO. So he needed to get back onto a winning routine. Well, then he fights Adam Lopez, the blue nose. You might have seen him on some, recent undercards. Somebody who's kind of making noise at 126, has a few losses, but is an exciting fighter, a pressure fighter who hits pretty damn hard. So Isaac Dogboe is able to kind of box successfully with Adam Lopez through the first half of the fight, jumping in and out, kind of doing his Isaac Dogboe thing, having the faster hands. Even though he has the shorter arms, he still has the quicker left hook, so he's getting his power punches in there, and he was making Adam Lopez look a little bit plodding and slow. But then Adam Lopez just started slowly turning the temperature up, and all of a sudden we see Isaac Dogboe on this treadmill from hell again, where he's looking like he's having to work and hold on and move and throw more punches than he needs to or that he's able to in terms of his endurance. So now he's looking tired. Now he's getting hit by harder shots in the second half of the fight. Now he's just looking a lot more vulnerable, where it's like, oh boy, here we go. And so it kind of turned into that for Isaac Dogboe, to where he looked like he was having to dig deep and hold on to survive a couple of these rounds. Well, they go the full 10-round distance, so this isn't even a 10-rounder, but it still ended up being ultimately grueling, where, on the commentary, you hear them saying, I believe it was Andre Ward or Timothy Bradley saying, you see Isaac Dogboe getting dragged back into that dark place that he was in against Navarrete. And so they go to the judges' scorecards, and Isaac Dogboe wins via majority decision. So a lot of that work and the success that he had early in the fight, and plus the way that Isaac Dogboe had to dig so deep in the 11th or 12th round, where he won either one of those rounds or something, both. One of the judges had him winning both. So he finished strong, and that saved the day for Isaac Dogboe. And it says a lot about the guy's heart, because it was not looking good in those kind of middle to late rounds. And then Dogboe fights one more time against Christopher Diaz in November of 2021. Another tough fight. He didn't take as much of a beating against Diaz as he did against Adam Lopez, and certainly not the type of beating he took in those two fights against Navarrete, but it was still a very competitive fight. This was actually on the Terrence Crawford versus Sean Porter undercard, and in this fight, Isaac Dogboe wins via majority decision. I actually thought that this one was going to be a unanimous decision, but again, it was still a pretty competitive fight. Christopher Diaz loses to usually only the best. He's lost to Navarrete, he's lost to Shakur Stevenson, and then he lost in 2021 November against Isaac Dogboe. So now we have Joet Gonzalez versus Isaac Dogboe. And I kind of feel like Isaac Dogboe is going to have success early in this one. Again, Joet Gonzalez can be a slow starter, but I feel like the sooner Joet Gonzalez realizes that Isaac Dogboe at 126 now, like he doesn't have the same type of punching power, in my opinion, that he did at 122. And I think that once Joet Gonzalez realizes, like, okay, I'm starting to get the timing down, I'm starting to kind of get the rhythm of Isaac Dogboe, who's going to move around, and then come in and throw some punches, throw some combinations. Once Joet Gonzalez kind of gets a read, and then he gets implored by his corner to do more and to work harder because you might be losing these early rounds, the sooner he can hit the switch and start applying that pressure where he's almost not reckless, but as willing to take the incoming fire as he was against Navarrete. Now, this Joet Gonzalez versus Navarrete fight also had me wondering, damn, Joet Gonzalez took way too much punishment in that Navarrete fight. That type of punishment absorption is unsustainable. I was feeling that, and not as badly as I was feeling on Dogboe's side against Navarrete, but it was still a very grueling, brutal fight. Competitive between Gonzalez and Navarrete, but still brutal. So if Joet Gonzalez still has a high threshold for punishment, and he's able to go in there and keep walking Dogboe down and making this second half of the fight look like that Adam Lopez versus Dogboe fight in the second half, then I think Joet Gonzalez could really come on strong and do some damage and really take Dogboe right back to that dark place in the second half of the fight. On the other hand, if Dogboe is able to hit cleanly enough to where he can hurt Gonzalez, I haven't seen Gonzalez get stopped yet. Yes, he was getting beaten up by Navarrete, but unless his egg is now cracked and he doesn't have the same durability, and that the wear and tear that he's taken, even in fights against like Santissima, if the accumulation has piled on to where he's not the same fighter, then okay, Dogboe could probably hurt him in the early rounds. But if Dogboe can't demonstratively hurt him, and even if Dogboe wins, say 3 out of the first 4 rounds or something like that, even if Dogboe's on that trajectory, I don't see Gonzalez just taking that type of, systemic round by round losing lying down. I just see him applying increased pressure to where he's going to make Isaac Dogboe have to work extremely hard. And the question is, how quickly can he do it? Does he do it by like the 4th round? Is Dogboe able to fend him off until the 7th round? Well, I think that in this one, I actually think that Isaac Dogboe is going to do enough to win this. Even though Dogboe is not the natural 126 pounder, Joet Gonzalez is naturally bigger. Okay, it's a 2-inch height advantage, but it's a 6-inch reach advantage. We're talking 70-inch reach for Gonzalez versus a 64-inch reach for Isaac Dogboe. So it's like, if Gonzalez can get the jab going earlier, Isaac Dogboe just has limits to what he's going to be able to do because he has to work so hard, it seems, to do it, even when he tries to buy time. Now, I don't think Gonzalez is going to stalk him as feverishly as Navarrete did, so I'm really kind of torn on this one. Can Dogboe control the spacing and the pacing of the fight enough to where Gonzalez isn't able to make the pressure a crisis of an issue until late in the fight, like the 7th, 8th round? I was going to flip and go with Joet Gonzalez because that reach is so much longer. And so if he keeps on pumping out the jab, that he's going to have Dogboe in trouble earlier. But I don't know. Maybe Joet Gonzalez gets to be a little bit too patient. And I rarely do this mid-video. I'm flip-flopping twice now, but now I'm throwing it back over to Joet Gonzalez. I was actually coming into the video saying that I'm taking Isaac Dogboe via decision, but as I'm thinking about this, I actually think that Joet Gonzalez is going to start getting busier earlier, and even though he's going to take a lot of flush punches, I still think he's got a lot of durability, and we just don't see him get shaky-legged a whole lot. So I think that he's learned from his losses against Shakur Stevenson, even though I don't think he would beat Shakur Stevenson if they fought a second or a third time. But I think that he has learned from his losses to Navarrete and Stevenson, and even in how long it took him to get going against Santissima, to where he's going to start turning it up kind of early against Dogboe. And I feel like Team Gonzalez has to know about Dogboe's past and where he's had difficulty with the increased pressure, especially in the second half of the fight. I just see us getting back to that place, but I do think that Dogboe has enough guts and heart and ability to even win some of those difficult rounds in the second half of the fight. But I just see the increased pressure by Joet Gonzalez being a real issue. Like, he's not a one-punch knock-you-out guy either. Gonzalez isn't. You know what? Damn it. I'm actually going to go with a draw on this one. I'm taking this is very anticlimactic, like a split draw, majority draw, something, but it's going to be a draw. I just see this being a tale of two fights. The part where Dogboe has some early success and then where Joet Gonzalez decides to come on. But even if Joet Gonzalez comes on earlier, like the 4th or 5th round, I still think Dogboe is going to win one or multiple rounds, like in the second half of the fight. I think we're going to arrive at a draw here. This is a 12-rounder, so there's a lot of variability. It's easier to call a draw, I think, in a 10-rounder, because with a 12-rounder, there's more of a chance of a knockdown or more of a chance that somebody takes control where they win like a few rounds rather than the back-and-forth nature that you could get in a 10-round fight, or the just clear tale of two fights that you could get in a 10-rounder. But I'm still going to go with a majority or split draw. Yeah, I was really like seeing two different fights. No, I was seeing a certain style of fight play out, and I still am. but it's the way that judges can give around to this guy versus to this guy, and the way that when you have heart like Dogboe, you could battle back and win a late round even when you're in a difficult period of the fight. I'm going to go with a draw here. But yeah, let me know what you think of Joet Gonzalez versus Isaac Dogboe in the comments. And please, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.